Welcome back to Control Room, January 21st, 2026. It's me, Joe Pasevich. And I've got dry air electrostatic effect on my few remaining hairs. Looks like I'm wearing feathers. How you doing, everybody? It's dry, it's cold. Of course, as you may have already heard, the news is that we're in for a real slug of winter weather coming up this coming Sunday night into Monday. So make your plans accordingly. It's good to have a little bit of advance warning. In the meantime, extremely cold tonight and Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday night into Tuesday. I was talking to somebody I know from the upper Midwest. I mean, where they're from, they're expecting nighttime temperatures in the teens below zero and wind chills in the 20s to 30s below zero. So as bad as it's going to be, someone's always got it worse. Last week, I had an issue with my audio, regulating my audio. So you may have seen, if you saw my show, there was a portion of the show where I appeared to be talking, but nothing was coming out. So I want to touch upon some of the commentary or the things that I was talking about at that moment. But we've got so much more to talk about. It's amazing what's going on. What do they call it? Is it called the Cloward Piven strategy? Remember, the lesson of Control Room is that if you want to understand what's happening, in Marshfield, look at what's happening nationally. And if you want to understand what's happening nationally, look at what's happening locally. Human nature being what it is, the same types of motivations and modus operandi apply. And oftentimes people who want to do something in government will create a situation to justify their actions. In other words, create a crisis so you can offer the solution. And the solution often benefits somebody. You're seeing that now nationally. You're seeing some of our so-called foreign policy being managed in such a way that certain connected individuals are really making a killing or stand to make a killing. And locally, you're being confronted. As I said the last couple of shows, we are in the town meeting and budgeting time of year when you're being told that things are terrible, that there's a $4.5 million deficit. Oh, crisis. Oh, we just passed an override vote. The vote was advertised by some people as a vote to fix the Martinson School roof. It wasn't that at all. It was a vote on how to finance the fixing of the roof. So personally, from what I've seen and heard, there was plenty of money in the budget. We could have borrowed money to fix the roof because we didn't have the $7 million to lay out to just, here's a check, fix the roof. It's just like the override we had more than 10 years ago. It was for a new police station, some seawall work, a senior center, a new DPW barn. Those were all clumped together in order to create a mass of support in order to pass the override at town meeting. That was a strategy. The senior center they could have written a check for it. I wasn't against the work on the senior center. Of course, I questioned how it was being laid out, what we were going to get for it. That's just natural. That's due diligence as a taxpayer. But we could have written a check for it. The other projects actually ended up with more money than they needed. The DPW was able to do a beautiful brand new maintenance facility. The police department never ran out of money. They had extra money to play with there. And the point is that even money was left over where over $1 million, my understanding on the numbers, over $1 million was kept in town hall by the town administrator. Apparently he was the one behind it, orchestrating this movement to do all kinds of major renovations inside town hall that we never voted on, we never discussed. over $1 million work inside and outside. So people create or paint a picture of dire conditions, a dire emergency, and there's a solution or an ulterior motive or set of plans or objectives that are being implemented. And locally, this applies now because, again, they're telling us there's this big deficit, and they primed us. They told us basically we had no money. We needed to do an override when we didn't have to do it. Now they're trying to get us ready for another potentially big fat override when there's no real emergency to do a big fat override. They're looking for some people are talking about an operational override for sometime this year. It could come to town meeting in the spring for a vote. Not likely, but it's possible. But certainly after that, there'll be people pushing for it. They're going to tell you that the South Shore Voc Tech is costing us so much money. They're going to tell you that, costs are going up, that the school district is renegotiating teacher contracts, and they're going to need who knows what percentage of a raise. They're saying they're negotiating the police department contracts when we've got multiple people on the police department making over $300,000 a year. All of these things are going to start coming out, and they're going to put the pressure on you because MINE applies. The concept of MIME, mine, more is never enough, applies when it comes to your government bureaucrats and administrators. Okay? So they're going to be applying that concept to us again, that things are dire. And the truth is that we've had $5 or $6 million surpluses the last few years, and our revenues are going up to the tune of like $3 million just from real estate taxes, plus new growth. What's local aid going to be? What's the return money from the state going to be? Cherry sheet, so-called, Chapter 91. Probably not going to decline all that much. But you're being put into a panic mode, and this is how they do it. They create a situation, they create an emergency, they create a crisis in order to offer you the solution. And now they're saying, we need to find money. We need to, So what happened? There was a little bit of a sort of a brainstorming session held at Town Hall. Was it about a week ago now? And it was hosted by Jack Griffin and the Capital Budget Committee. And I would say like 90% of the time was talked about parking management for the town of Marshfield. Yes, parking management. You know what that means. Parking meters or some form of parking meters. Maybe not a meter where you put a quarter in. Maybe like in the city of Lowell where you have to go to a kiosk. Many cities and towns are doing that now where you don't put a quarter in a meter. The meters in Boston, you can put coins in or you can swipe a card, like a debit card or a credit card. A lot of places you have to go to a kiosk and enter a card and then pay that way. So they're talking about doing this in Marshfield, and as if this is some kind of a solution to fix the crisis. You see where I'm going? They create the crisis to create a solution, and it's the solution you need to look really carefully at as much as the crisis. First of all, to see if the crisis is legitimate, and the solution has to be looked at very carefully to see who benefits. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a little bit about the Plymouth Growth and Development Corporation. My friends, if you're computer literate, look up PGDC, the Plymouth Growth and Development Corporation. All right? This is what we seem to be being steered into. And who knows who on the Plymouth Growth Development Corporation? What are the connections? At the meeting I watched, the fellow's name I think is John Burke, spoke at this little brainstorming session I just mentioned, and he seemed to know Bob Galvin. He was like, hey, Bob, hi, John. There seemed to be a familiarity there. That's the way I read the interaction, okay? That's my opinion, that I would guess they know each other. And I think Bob Galvin was or is the counsel for the Plymouth Airport. So, and he's got his feelers and fingers out in a lot of different municipalities around us. Town council for Marshfield, town council for Norwell, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway. But let me go back to that meeting of the select board, and I'm going to see if I can bring it up to the point near the end where there's talking about how to structure the town administrator search. That's the other thing I want to talk about briefly, try to be brief, is the town administrator search process. Mike Maresco resigned under sort of fuzzy, questionable, cloudy circumstances, okay? We know something about what was going on around that time that coincided with his departure. We know there were a lot of emails back and forth between the town and the inspector general and the attorney general, where they particularly related to what was going on and the eventual resignation of Mr. Maresco. Well, I don't know. Why don't you ask around? So he's been gone for a while. The initial town administrator search effort was failed. Right off the bat, I questioned how candidates were going to be lined up, how they were going to be sought out, how the advertising was going to be done. The Collins Center from UMass, guilty by association, okay? Collins Center, UMass. Was that named after John Collins, the former mayor of Boston? I don't know. Somebody tell me. Took over the process, basically. I think was pretty rude to some people on the search committee, the 7-person search committee that was established by the select board. Very badly constituted. Did not represent the interests of the people the way it should have. I mean, after all, Eric Kelly and Patricia Simpson were elected on a reform ticket, on a reform effort, on a reform sentiment, of a frustration sentiment. And since then, Trish Simpson has become a very good politician. She seems to be more driven towards appearing fair and reaching out to all parties simultaneously. Eric Kelly still seems committed to the reform and accountability and agenda, if you could call it an agenda. To me, it's common sense. So there is no block. And of course, Steve Darcy is old-time establishment. He's the regime. He's the former campaign worker for Mr. Cantwell. And he represents, in my eyes, the regime, the old establishment. Maresco, Fiddler, Galvin, Tavares, the old establishment that runs the town. Trish Simpson, nobody knows who she talks to. She's doing her own thing. And that's not always bad. But where is the commitment and the visible and substantial commitment to reform and openness and letting the outsiders, the people that have been marginalized for over 25 years in this town, who've been speaking out and asking for accountability, going way back to the days before George Shaw, Rusty Tremonti, Bob Parkus, myself, the people that were asking the question, Section 10 at town meeting, who've been in the trenches for over 25 years. And Patricia Simpson was well aware of them. She's well aware of me. She's well aware of what I've done and some of the prices I've paid. And now, Joe who? So anyway, let me see if I can go back to this. Let me see. I'm going to try to bring up the select board meeting, so.
Discussion and vote on town administrator search process. I really, after the last time I don't know how we should do this, so I am open to suggestions to move this process forward. So Steve, if you got anything, you put some thought into it, how you like to see it.
Yeah, I don't think the pool of candidates will drastically change in the course of a month, but I'm thinking, we have Charlie and Peter at our disposal who have done the job for a long time, and they've done it at a very high level. So they understand what the job takes and what it entails better than anyone. And so I would be in favor of empowering, Charlie and Peter to have some runway to try to recruit and vet different candidates to apply to the town, because what will be helpful with them is they're going to be able to look beyond the resume. They're going to know what the inside scoop is for anyone who applies for Massachusetts. They're going to know what was left out of the resume deliberately.
So see, Steve Darcy, he's okay with taking Charlie Sumner and Peter Moran. Now, Peter Moran was town administrator in Norwell when Bob Galvin was town council. They all admit they know each other. Galvin, Clifford, Moran. They've all worked together. They've all collaborated at some level. Charlie Sumner is a little bit more of an unknown, but no, he's basically part of the same. These are all his contemporaries. And so being the insider regime establishment guy, Steve Darcy, he's not a reformer. He's not a liberal in the sense that, he's looking for openness and accountability. He's looking for posturing. He's looking for playing to his team, to his base. Trish Simpson should be playing and serving her base, but she doesn't. Eric Kelly understands his base. He knows what his base is. He knows what he was sent there to do, and he's trying to do it, which makes him with the big giant target on his back. Because the big fear of the Democrat liberal establishment regime in this town, the big fear was that somehow Trish Simpson, who knocked off an incumbent who was part of the inside regime, was going to form a alliance with Eric Kelly and create some big reforms. Now, she has done some of that, but they will continue working. The insiders will continue working to cleave, to fracture, to keep Eric Kelly from cooperating with his base, to keep Trish Simpson from cooperating with the base that put her in position, and to keep Eric and Trish from forming any kind of alliance. They have to maintain that division. And the way they do it is they suck up to Trish and they attack Eric. And they attack Eric and they attach him to all the vicious, vile, naysayer, venom-spewing, anti-government people. They just, watch when some of the people in the audience come to these meetings. When people like Martine and Peg come to the meetings. Watch when they come to the meetings. And they're shaking their heads. They're making noises, little cat calls and harassments. That's the whole plan. That's how it's working. Anyway, so Steve Darcy's fine with keeping the establishment in control of the whole process. He wants the select board, he wants the new town administrator to be another continuation of the old regime. Now, Trish Simpson, she wants to be fair. She wants to be the bridge, the peacekeeper. She's an elementary school teacher by trade, right? So that's what she has to do. She's got to herd the cats, and everybody's got to get along. And you got to be told, this is, use your indoor voice, and all the whole procedures. We've all been to elementary school, right? Most of us have, right? So Steve Darcy makes his spiel about how he thinks things should go. Let's see if we can join in with what Trish is saying.
For anyone who applies for Massachusetts, they're going to know what was left out of the resume deliberately. They're going to know what was massaged that is on there. and they're going to have a fuller scope and understanding of who exactly the applicant is.
Amazing how much Steve Darcy knows about these guys.
They could produce really good results for the town, and then that there's not any issues with any sort of personnel management or power dynamics, because there's no self-interest in whoever Peter or Charlie recommend, right? They've done this before in many other communities.
So what Steve Darcy is saying, he just said it in the most thinly veiled way. He doesn't want the new town administrator chosen with the influence of the opposition, with the naysayers, the Eric and Trish. That's what Darcy is saying right there. Oh, we want to avoid any appearance of conflict, of a rigged situation, of a setup. In other words, we don't want the people now ostensibly in power, Trish and Eric, to tell us who's going to be the town administrator. That's what they've been panicking about all this time. Whereas when Darcy was in power with Kilcoyne and Fiddler, everything is fine, everything's wonderful. Don't ask any questions, nothing to see here, folks. But when the power balance gets thrown away from them, all of a sudden we've got to apply extra high standards and be extra careful and not portray or present any appearance of wrongdoing or fix of the fix being in, which is what we've been fighting in this town for over 25 years. Oh.
Any of the time that I worked on this particular project. I would also recommend that we have Danielle Keller serve as an ex officio member. You don't want me keeping track of all the details. And, you know, I'm sort of a 10,000 feet kind of guy.
So at least this guy, Charlie Sumner, makes some good points. I mean, he says, you know, it shouldn't be like Steve Darcy wants and the insider team wants. It should be 5 residents on the search committee. But he then offers his advice as an experienced administrator. He wants to be an ex officio along with Peter Moran and the Human Resources Department and possibly Meg LeMay in order to help guide the search committee in determining like criteria and qualifications for town administrator candidates. And that's reasonable. But of course, then Trish throws it all away and she wants a hybrid. You know, Eric Kelly's more on the side. Let's do it the way we did it before. Let's get a bunch of citizens together, but we'll change the recruitment process and the advertising process. But then Trish wants a committee. She's not sure. She wants Peter Moran and Charlie Sumner and maybe Meg LeMay or someone from Human Resources, and maybe 1 or 2, or is it 3? But it's a committee of 5, but I don't know if it's 2 or 3. She can't get her math straight. And what is she doing that for? Why is she straddling the fence? And she'll admit that there are people in this town that can make a decision, a good pick on the search committee. But again, they have to be sort of neutral. She's trying to describe someone so neutral. In other words, she's going out of her way to say, I'm not going to pick someone like Joe or Steve Lynch or anybody. Oh, you got to believe me. It's like the person that goes out of their mind, deathly afraid of being called a racist. They're so afraid of being labeled something that they go out of their way to placate the opposition. And to me, it's more like Trish is now trying to play all sides. She's trying to become like the ideal vanilla flavored politician for the town of Marshfield, which I've never seen anything quite like it. At least Chris Rowland wasn't afraid of his liberal roots. Let's see, who else was like nondescript? You know, John Hall, right? Yeah, there's been a couple. They're just kind of nondescript. But Trish goes out of her way to sort of portray herself, to paint herself as being the ultimate neutral person. And it's not going to help. I thought she recognized what was wrong with this town. And then, of course, she voted against me when Chief Tavares should have been investigated for threatening me. And the point of an investigation like that was just to document, in other words, to get on paper, this is what this person said, this is what that person said. It wasn't about any kind of indictment or inquisition. It was just, let's get the facts together so we can make a decision and learn something. No, Trish saw the crowds, she buckled. Because that's the kind of select board member you have in Trish Simpson. She's going to buckle to the pressure, and the insiders who feel like they've been threatened and lost power, they see that like a dog smells fear or a wild animal smells fear. They see that. Ooh, we got her. We got her. Oh.
So one select board member, unless you want to keep us out of it until the final round, but I was thinking one select board member, Meg. Danielle would get all the applications and kind of peruse through them. One of the interims, and then some type of community representation. And I think we learned that we probably should stick with 5 in the search committee. I think 7 is just too big and too many schedules, and
One person from the public is what you're saying?
probably 2, because it would be, if we want voting members, probably 2 or 3.
Yeah,
Maybe
I'd like to make
3.
a suggestion too. I think most of the comments have been really good. I like the idea of having Peter or Charlie working on that. I like your idea of marketing it as a challenge. I think I'd like to see perhaps 2 community people, and perhaps we could take somebody from the search committee like Andrew, who I think did a very good job with the tools he was given.
Price is the most wonderfully scary actor.
Discussion and vote on town administrator search process.
I kind of like that level of involvement by the select board, as long as council thinks we're not violating anything.
Bob?
My only suggestion for your consideration would be that you ask a town administrator or town manager in another community that's very experienced to sit on your pre-screening committee. Because
And maybe somebody I know.
questions of the pre-screening committee formulate the right questions, because this person, man or woman, would understand what a town administrator does.
All right, that's enough of that. I can't stand it anymore. So that's the way it's going. So right now, the way it is that if you want to be on the town administrator search committee, you're supposed to put in an application, okay? You're supposed to put in an application at town hall by this coming Monday. And then the way I understand it, Peter Moran, and who's coming back to work for the town of Marshfield, I think maybe starting Monday, while Charlie Sumner is still here. We have a duo interim town administrator team, the dynamic duo, Batman and Robin, and they are going to look at the people who want to be on the search committee. And the insiders, people like Martine Anderson and Peg and all these other people, they're going to flood the place with forms. And then those 2 interim town administrators, non-residents, are going to pick 3 residents. I guess it's 3 residents, maybe 5. I don't know. I didn't hear the final number. Is it 5? Somebody tell me. Even if it's 5, they are going to pick who's on it. And Trish Simpson, like her guidance that she's offering is like, well, but they have to be, they can't be associated. They can't be Joe Pasevich types. No, she didn't say that. She did in a way without saying it. And they can't be, anybody controversial. But they have to be really wise, and they have to really have a good eye. How are you going to know that? Peter Moran, how do you know what Peter Moran and Charlie Sumner are going to apply as criteria? How are you going to know? You're not going to know. Anyway, we're going to move on. Enough time on that. So the Capital Budget Committee, the next story I want to talk about, had a little meeting, and they had a guy come in named John Burke. By the way, the control room hotline is operating as far as I can tell. So if you do have a comment or a call, you can call the control room hotline. I hear the studio phones are ringing off the hook, but we haven't had a good phone service here in the studio for some time. Anyway, so the Capital Budget Committee says, again, cloud and pivot strategy. You got to tell people there's a crisis and we've got a solution. Let's make it look like it's a community, a group effort, a brainstorming session. How can we find more money? Somebody told me recently they remember this happening many years ago, maybe when Carol Schrand was on the school committee, and they were looking for money. And it might have been around the time of was it 2004 or 7 override. They were looking for a fat like a $4.5 million operational override. People got outraged by that. And so what ended up happening is there were two choices on the override ballot for that override. You could vote for a $2 million or a $4 million operational override. And the $4 million operational override was defeated. The $2 million override passed. So your taxes went up by collectively by additional $2 million across town. Was it really needed? Who knows? But that's the beauty of Prop 2.5, is the town gets to decide if you're going to have an override. Some people want to get rid of 2.5. They just want the government to set tax rates and tax collections and tax revenue amounts willy-nilly as much as they want. What brought about 2.5, Prop 2.5, was some towns were raising real estate taxes collectively like 10% or more in a year. And people were getting slammed. And Prop 2.5 has already got so many loopholes and exceptions in it. Come on. All right? You can't do that to the taxpayers. Anyway. So you had a choice back then, $2 million or $4 million. And the school committee was looking for money. And I remember they had a meeting, and somebody reminded me of this tonight. When Carol Schrand was on the board, I think maybe, who was the other guy? Diamond? No, not Diamond. Who was the other guy? Who was the other guy? Who was the head of the school committee at the time? Oh, the chair. Somebody remind me. Call me. But anyway, Kaufman, that's right, Kaufman. And they had an exercise. They had a meeting, and they brought in some students from the high school. And they broke out into groups, into discussion groups, and they subgroups sitting at different tables. And they said, let's all brainstorm on how to raise money for the schools. And it was silly stuff. It was like, selling pencils and stuff like that. And cutting down on toilet paper purchases. I'm not kidding. All right? So they kind of try to portray this as a way to get the community involved. So this is a very tricky, soft sell process that goes on. But ultimately, people that are running this know what they want. Believe me, they know what they want. So here we go. So the Capital Budget Committee says, we got to brainstorm. We need money. The town's need, $4.5 million. That number's already been thrown out there by Charlie Sumner and other people, by journalists online at the Patriot Ledger, South Shore News. The town, Christine Hill from Duxbury, the town is broke. Oh my God. $4.5 million. Where are we going to get that? We've only had $5 and $6 million surpluses every year for the last few years. How can you go from a $6 million surplus to a $4 million deficit? All of a sudden, almost 10% of the revenues just disappear? It's impossible. It's impossible. And the full payments that we're going to have to make to South Shore Voc Tech aren't going to kick in for at least a couple more years. We can ease into that. But we needed more cuts, and we got to stop with the big fat raises. Like I said, how many people in a police department making over $300,000? How many of them have a spouse that's working for the town that's also making over $100,000? Imagine families, there are households in this town on the town payroll making like $500,000 or so, or pushing $500,000. People are afraid to ask about this. Who's the only person who gets up at town meeting and says, could you explain that budget item? What's this about ambulances? And if it's related to police or fire department, people, oh, don't go there. Next time I get pulled over, oh, you know. Next time I have a heart attack, you know. And I'm not casting aspersions on our first responders, but this is how people think, that something bad's going to happen to them. It's like when the chief threatened me on the phone and said, I'll let you go, Joe. I'm going easy on you. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I noticed you were driving around in your truck with an expired inspection sticker. It's the last thing I need, to have to walk home. Like the time they arrested me and they brought me down and put me in shackles down at the Plymouth courthouse and left me there with no way to get home. I don't want that. And if I have a kid who's like wants to play sports or be a cheerleader or something like that, that's how people think. I'm not saying that's what's actually happening, but that's how people think. They're intimidated. They're afraid. When people are afraid of the government, right, you have tyranny. When the government is afraid of the people, you have liberty. But anyway, so you're being scared into thinking we have this big deficit. So let's brainstorm. Let's all kumbaya. Let's all hang out together. You think the people that put these sessions together already know what they want or what's going to happen? Let's see if we can see some of that clip. So they bring in this guy, John Burke. And one of the wonderful, brilliant brainstorms, obviously, is let's put parking meters in town or some form of parking meters.
Successful if they're not turning those spaces 4, 5, 6 times a day. They're just not going to be as successful.
And there's where you limit the 2 hours comes into play.
Yeah,
You
correct.
put some limits on them so they can't just sit still.
That's right.
But those are restaurants, so that's another whole thing. So do you really want, I don't know.
And they can validate their customers' parking too.
Absolutely.
You can give them the ability to, the customer pays, they can come in, they can spend, and the business owner can validate it. That's a program we've done with communities too. They have to participate in that cost, but,
I mean,
so there's, you can comp anybody you want, but the first thing is to figure out the plan, what you're talking about. Where are we putting the
Right.
long-term parking? Where are we gonna have, how are we gonna free up this customer? Or beach parking.
Because do our businesses have issues with parking?
I don't think they worry about it right now because it's, you know, people find a way. I don't think they're worrying about it, but,
Yeah.
I mean, the Haddad's always had their own parking and the Venus has somewhat parking and people just find a way. I've been in Brant Rock my whole life. It's you know, people just find it. I mean, there's events like the race and all that you
Right.
can't really park. But if you had, especially the summer, we triple in size.
Yeah.
If you could just add a space, like you said, right down the road, even the Peter Ago, you know, so in Marcowan, we're having the same problem, too many cars. A restaurant, people, if they go there 2 or 3 times, they can't find a parking space, they don't come back to Marshfield. They don't come back. They said, I can't get a parking space. I can't get in. So if you, I mean, they're trying to think of a trolley system as a central parking, and then they trolley everybody, you know, trolley from the parking spaces. But if we did something like that, like the center of town in the summer is not as busy as Brant Rock or other areas. If you had some parking pay-as-you-go, like you pay and you can just take a bus down to Brant Rock, that might solve problems.
So you get the picture? What are they talking about, actually? And as far as I can tell, the best I can tell, and I just want to make you aware of what's going on, what the thought process is, what they're trying to do. All right? Do your own research if necessary, or if you see me around, ask me a question. There's something called the Plymouth Growth and Development Corporation, the PGDC. Let me read you from their own website, their history and mission. The Plymouth Development Corporation was created in 2002 as a quasi-public corporation for the town of Plymouth. By Chapter 182 of the Acts of 2002, it's known as a Special Act. In the Special Act, the Massachusetts legislature gave the corporation the following charge. It is the purpose of the corporation created by this act to aid the town, private enterprises and nonprofit organizations and other public agencies in the speedy and orderly development or redevelopment of unused, underused, or underdeveloped areas, and the development, operation, and management of facilities and infrastructure necessary to support the economic vitality of the development zone. The PGC is managed by a 7-member voluntary board of directors appointed by the select board. So this is a concept that they apparently want to apply, and it's just, we just want to raise a little money. But what they don't tell you is they want to set up a bureaucracy, a multi-million-dollar bureaucracy, and they want to tie it in to a sort of a regional authority. Of course, there's a volunteer board that manages this. But there's an executive director. Now, if you're in the housing authority like me, you learn very fast that the executive director basically has or tries to hold all the operational control over the organization. One person who ran for housing authority, who I will not name, but you probably know who it is, actually told a friend of mine, and it's kind of like secondhand, so it's hard for me to say. It wouldn't be admissible in court, that our job on the housing authority is to just approve things, like a rubber stamp, in other words. So you think this volunteer board appointed by the selectmen is going to really, I mean, what are they going to do? And it's a quasi-public organization. What are they going to do to be accountable? And it's a quasi-public organization, which, guess what? Means they're not subject to open meeting law and public records law. So if you go, well, I want to know how much money was collected in the parking operations in Marshfield and where it got spent and what the salaries are, good luck getting that information. And there's something called the Plymouth County Parking Program has expanded to 43 municipalities. So if you don't pay your parking fee, it now is processed through something called the Plymouth County Parking Program, which is no longer limited to Plymouth County. It's spreading throughout the state. I went down to Plymouth once to get a takeout dinner at one of the fish restaurants. There was nobody there. It was the end of the season. The season was over. The tourist season was over. There's empty spaces everywhere. I said, well, I'll pull in here and I'll jump in and I'll pick up my fish or clams or whatever I was having. I come out, I got a ticket. Like minutes, just a few minutes later. So they're like hovering like ospreys or red-tailed hawks looking for prey. And this guy on the capital budget committee said, the trouble I have trying to get parking, and the people having trouble parking, they're not going to come back. Well, yeah, you come and get a nice fat ticket, you're not going to come back. That's what I've decided. So that's what's happening with that. So remember, they're trying to create a situation, and that's one of the solutions they're offering. But you need to know more about what constitutes the solution. You see? Create the crisis, offer the solution, and somebody cleans up. But you're supposed to be grateful. Right? It's kind of like what's happening in Gaza right now. They create a horrible crisis. And the solution is that basically a few people are going to clean up. It's like Venezuela. You create an awful crisis, and who's going to clean up? A few people that are in the petro business, petroleum processing business. You see how that works? Now, on top of that, Jack Griffin just posted today on the various couple of the Facebook forums a little post called "Exploring Revenue and Cost Saving Options for Marshfield." Parking management is one. 2 is commercial aquaculture. We already talked about parking management. Commercial aquaculture means let's do something like they're doing in Duxbury Bay. Let's set out these cages and do oyster farming. And 3, AI energy optimization. So these are the 3 concepts currently under review, according to the Post. Parking management at the Brant Rock Esplanade. Commercial aquaculture, AI-based HVAC. Brant Rock Esplanade parking is resident-free, technology-based management. and it involves managing parking at the Brant Rock Esplanade using modern technology rather than traditional parking meters. Marshfield residents park at no charge, no physical parking meter, so you got to go like a kiosk, or according to this, your license plate will be scanned every time you go to Brant Rock. Whether you're a resident or non-resident, your license plate gets scanned. So there's a record of you, where you are, what you're doing, all right? 2-hour parking limit. You're a visitor, you can renew your 2-hour limit on your phone. So your phone now has a record of how much time you're spending and where you're spending. We're already tracked mercilessly. We live in a consumer surveillance society. Let's just add to it. It's just like there was a proposal at the at a meeting recently. Was it the select board meeting that I went to, where they want to put cameras on the trails in town. Now, there's a couple of places where they claim to have issues. Like there's a porta potty down on the beach on the North River, and vandals sometimes knock the porta potty over. So they want to like put a camera there so they can, what are they going to do? They're going to identify the person knocking over the porta potty? I don't know. Anyway, so that's that. Then there's this commercial aquaculture. They're going to use locations on the rivers, presumably the North and South rivers, and they're going to bid out, let people bid to use those locations. Now, I don't know how you're going to choose the locations. I don't know how you're going to determine if they're environmentally sound and safe and clean. If you go on the Green River, like you know where the dike road is, and you look at the dike and you see it flows into the Green River, Bass Creek area, there are mud beds on the shores there that have clams in them. I've actually seen them. I guess they're technically freshwater clams, I think. But anyway, that's kind of brackish water. I don't know if the things would work there, like on the inland side of the dike. I don't know. Who's going to pick those areas? Who's going to evaluate it? What's it going to cost to do that? And then there's the idea of AI management of town buildings' HVAC systems. I thought when we engaged with the Train Corporation, TRANE, remember that many years ago, 20 years ago? I thought they were going to introduce all kinds of monitoring and efficiency measures, even in this building. I think by code, during my show recently, the lights turned off because there was no motion in the room. There are automatic sensors that turn off lights to conserve energy. And I would hope they're not running the building at high temperature all night long. That's all computer controlled. So what is this AI management? Oh, we have to hire a company to install the AI management. And then we pay them every year. Is this like another PGDC deal where we're going to hire a corporation to like manage some aspect of our infrastructure? And then we have to pay them? Do we get a check for the AI management of HVAC or for the management of park? No. Well, I think in the PGC there may be a provision where some money actually comes back to the town. But who's going to determine how it gets spent? And how are you going to know if it's a quasi-public agency what the actual money flow is? Because they're not going to have to comply with public records requests. But in the case of AI management, what happens? We pay this company a check every year, give them a check every year, and then what? They get to tell us, we saved you $100,000. Well, how do you know that? Well, anybody can fudge numbers. Well, the mean temperature last year was 62.4 degrees, and therefore we use this much electricity for HVAC and this much for heating and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, who's going to actually dig into that and understand how many therms were consumed, right? How are you going to hold this accountable? And how much is going to be saved as a percentage of the overall budget? So it's wonderful brainstorming, but who ultimately benefits from these? From what I can see, a couple of corporations. And will oyster farms change the usage or appearance of our waterfront areas? Do we want to see that? Just for the sake of making a few bucks? As somebody said on one of the forums today, we might as well go back to the photography fees that they were talking about at the parks. Remember the photography fees? Crazy. And then the other fee they wanted was to rent the parks like the park down at the town pier. So they could have, people could have private parties and serve booze. That's not what a public park is for. Anyway, next is another element of the big crisis that you're facing now is the school budget. Let's see if we can get a little bit of background. Again, I'm just trying to expose yourself to these areas of concern. I can't go in depth into them because I talk too much for one thing. But let's look at what the school committee meetings, how they're going.
And then the other thing to highlight here is our salary percentage of our budget versus our expense portion of our budget. And we'll get a little bit into detail on this in a moment, but you can see this is the first year where we had a dramatic turn on our salary percentage of our budget versus our expense budget. And we're about 85% right now, salaries for this fiscal year, 15% expenses. It's a pretty dramatic change as it's slowly creeped up. Our salary percentage has creeped up over the years. This is just highlighting our last 9 years. And you can see we were fortunate to initially not have a 4.4% increase for this school year, but it was originally a 3, it moved to around the 3.45. And then we were fortunate to receive some additional funding right before town meeting to push that budget number to the 60.24 million that it is for this school year. Last 9 years, an average increase of just slightly over 3%. So that's typically what we, typically on an annual basis, we try to work out a budget where we have a 3% increase.
So that's, I want you to get familiar with what's happening now. They're admitting now that when it comes to budgets, the overwhelming percentage of budgets is salaries. Overwhelming. So if you want to control budgets, what do? You've got to get a handle on salaries. And that's whether they're administrative or union, school, fire, police, all right, town clerical, whatever it is. And you've got to look at where some of the big bloated salaries are. Small decreases or checks on somebody's bloated. Remember, Eric Kelly voted against the police chief's new contract. Why? Oh, he hates the chief. He had a hearing against the chief in June because, he wants to remove him. What? That's crazy. That's not what's happening. The thing is that the salary increase that went with that new contract was excessive, according to Eric Kelly. And that's what we should all be thinking. We got to watch these salary increases. There are salary increases that are going on in town government and government in general that are not being matched in the private sector, all right? How many of you out there got 3%, 4% raise last year? I hope a lot of you did. Believe me, the town leaders know that there's plenty of pickings out there, all right? But not for everybody. Let's see if it's another school. I'm trying to give you some background of how they talk about things and what they're talking about doing.
So, Sean, it's the plan to dust off the old MOU and re-sign that?
Yeah, I mean, we do have it. We brought it to a couple meetings. I think we brought it to a meeting with Peter Moore and the former intertown
We brought it to Mr. Maresco, his attention.
Yeah.
He was not supportive.
Yeah, the town hasn't had the appetite for it. And I mean, hopefully we're entering a new phase with the town finances because, we can look back at that. We want to look at this as a whole town because school department is clearly a part of the town. If you look at the numbers of how the municipal side increased over these years, it's in the 5% plus range. So there hasn't been equitable revenue sharing, and that's something we've continually brought up. we need to get closer to that. Because at this point, you're going to see on our side that we have, and as I stated in the FY26 report, there's no room. There's no room. We have very thin margins. So we, all along throughout this process, we've been just asking for the same percentage increase for our expenditures as the municipal side.
It becomes a competition. Hey, the town got 5% increase, but is that salaries and expenses or what? So they're getting 5, so we want 5. You see what's happening there? And then they have something, they refer to something called a Memorandum of Understanding with the town on revenue sharing. I think that might have been a Moresco creation. A Memorandum of Understanding. They make it sound like there was a promise made that, don't worry, the school department's going to get as big of increases as everybody else, and they call it revenue sharing. I call it pillaging. All right, they want a chunk of the booty, the spoils. Revenue sharing, what a wonderful term. It's like Mike Moresco used to call increased taxes investments. Memorandum of Understanding, that's like what we have with the United States foreign policy dictators have with Israel. We signed a memorandum of understanding to give them $30 billion or $50 billion over like a 5-year period or something, 10-year period. Why is there a memorandum of understanding for anything? Like a promise, oh, we're going to take care of you. We're going to send lots of money your way. And as far as this, what's always comes up and should come up in school department discussions is staffing. The school enrollments are going down. And the cost of running the school department, the school district, goes up and up and up.
In the last 2 years, the Marshfield Public Schools have not filled almost 20 FTE in positions. You can see it runs the gamut here to the tune of $1.6 million. So we have, the Marshfield Public Schools have been reducing. There have been reductions. They're right here. We've done it very systematically and have not filled positions as teachers have retired, as employees have left the district. So this is just in the last 2 years, last school year and this school year, and also over the years. There's a couple. There's 2 elementary teacher positions on this slide, but over the last 15 years, we've reduced elementary classrooms over 20 elementary teachers. So we have been adjusting with our declining enrollment. There's a fallacy out there that we haven't, primarily because if you look at our number of employees, which is a figure that really doesn't equate.
Well, we're going to have to get into that again on the next show. There's a lot to be broken out there. Yeah, they do a trick. Teachers retire, staff members retire all the time. There's nothing unusual about that. But they also hire new people. And they also give raises to the people that are remaining. We'll get more into that on another program. So many other things. Oh, we got to talk about the Rick Smith campaign. You know, the guy that says that we're basically racists. For not allowing MBTA zoning. Good night, everybody. I'm Joe Pasevich for Control Room. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay warm. Watch out for that storm that's coming up, okay? And when you see me around, please do stop me and say hello.